Stand your ground says that you do not have a duty to retreat and can use deadly force if you reasonably believe it is necessary to prevent death or great bodily injury. Mm, unless you live in the state of Texas.
You are now listening to The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast hosted by Kay on Spotify. A podcast aimed to uncover and share the stories behind heinous and insane acts that have been overlooked or overshadowed by mainstream media, getting justice for the voices that can't speak.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl Kay, and I am the host of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast. A podcast designed to focus on crimes committed in the Black community that you don't hear about in mainstream media, giving a voice to those victims that have otherwise been silenced. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast with me, Kay, the Texas girl in a Georgia world, baby. Ladies, how y'all feel? Fellas, y'all all right? It is Monday, June 15th, 2026, and your girl is feeling so apologetic, y'all. I sincerely apologize. The episode was recorded and was published to drop yesterday. However, I got some information that had to be corrected, and I didn't want to, risk putting the episode out and then y'all hearing wrong information because I ain't trying to get sued. Okay. So I quickly unpublished the episode, and well, because of that, I had to go in and like re-record everything. So that's why y'all are getting it a day late. Again, my apologies for that. But I'm also feeling very hopeful too because I got this promotional opportunity that could really put the show out there and, get these streams up and get these reviews up and whatnot. And so, I'm really just kind of pushing to try to get the show out there more. Like, especially since streams have gone down about 25%, and that is not good at all. So, I'm really, really pushing to get it out there and on top of that, I'm coming back from my little mini vacation me and my tiny human had. It's back to work, it's back to reality. I was so mad because yesterday I had the episode recorded on time and everything. Like, I was doing a wine tour with some of my girls yesterday through Middle Georgia Wine Excursions. Shout out to them. And so I'm like, okay, I'm drinking my wine and sipping and having a good time, and we out and about. And I'm like, oh, my episode gonna drop while we out. And then I got that email saying this was incorrect information. And I was like, ah. So I had to go in, unpublish the episode and all of that. So, again, my apologies about that. But I will say I definitely enjoyed yesterday. It was much needed. I got nice and toasty, which of course leads me to my next question. What y'all sipping on? Now, I've been, sipping on some wines pretty much all day yesterday, and I bought like several bottles of the new wines that I liked and tried. So, I've got some of that today. I'm drinking Liquid Death, however, because I don't want to do too much. Like, I feel like if I drink another glass of wine, there's going to be wine in my bloodstream for real. Now, y'all are going to need it because when I tell you this case today, ooh, baby. Now, look, if you've been keeping your ear to the streets or scrolling through your news feed lately, you already know the name that's been on everybody's lips. The whole city, the whole state, and honestly, the whole country has been locked into what just went down in Collin County courtroom. So let's get into it. Hop on in and buckle up because we about to head down south to Frisco, Texas to 2025, which was literally last year. I know. 2025, it had its fair share of craziness. New Year's Day, what you had the man that was inspired by ISIS that drove a Ford F-150 pickup into those pedestrians on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing like 14 people and injuring 57 people. Then you got Kendrick Lamar and SZA. They took over the charge with Luther. Beyonce became the first Black woman to win Country Album of the Year. Tyler Perry's Straw had us swallowing that lump in our throat. Oh my God, I feel so bad for that lady in that movie. And then the US government had a shutdown that started like October 1st and went 45 days, which was like the longest in history. But in Frisco, Texas, self defense was questioned when a simple seat under a tent on a rainy day sparked a national outrage. Y'all ready, mobbers? Y'all know what time it is. Let's get it. This week's case involves Austin Metcalf, the victim, Hunter Metcalf, Austin's twin brother, Eddie Para, Carmelo's friend and witness, and the infamous murderer of the week, Karmelo Anthony. Karmelo Sincere Anthony, not to be confused with Carmelo Anthony, the basketball player. Like, I'm rather disappointed in how many people actually think that an NBA player was involved in this. Ugh, do better, people. Carmelo Sincere Anthony was born out in Baton Rouge, Louisiana on May 11, 2007 to Andrew and Kayla Anthony. Now, growing up in the early days, he was surrounded by family. He, of course, was raised by his parents, and he wasn't alone. He had siblings. He was the oldest of four children. His sister, Aaliyah, who was born in 2011. He had a brother, Andrew Anthony Jr., whom the family nicknamed AJ. And then his youngest brother was Kingston. Now, being the big brother to three younger siblings means you got eyes on you at all times. You feel me? I know it all too well. Like you got to be the leader. You got to set the tone. You got little eyes watching you, and then you got the older eyes watching you. And being the oldest, you kind of make the mistakes and do everything first. You know what I'm saying? Like I am lucky that I am not the oldest on either side. But when I say my eyes were glued on my oldest on both sides, and that told me what to do and what not to do because I saw how a couple of times they was getting mollywopped. But I digress. So, like I said, Carmelo was the oldest of four kids. He's holding it down, being the big brother. But while the roots started deep down in Louisiana, life moved him and his family on a different path. So the family packed up and they headed west, and Carmelo ended up growing up and spending his defining years out in Frisco, Texas. Now, if you know anything about Frisco, it's a whole different vibe, from Baton Rouge. It's a fast growing, heavy suburban area right outside of Dallas. That's where, he had to plant his feet, adapt to the environment, and make a name for himself. And one of those names that he made for himself was actually Lifesaver. So I was doing some snooping, and in a Facebook post that I found dated from May 17th of 2021 from Trend Cool Customs, she discusses how at 14 years old, Carmelo saved a kid's life. So I was reading the post and it said, read fully to understand God's calling over Andrew and Kayla's child's life at an early age. Good morning, everyone. We want to let you all know how proud we are of Carmelo. This past weekend, he saved someone's life. We got him and his cousins a hotel room for his birthday/graduation so they can swim, play the games, and just hang out. On Saturday evening, they were in the pool with a few other children whose parents were present at the time. Andrew and I had just left the pool to get ready to go to the store. We were told at the time the kids were racing from one side of the pool to the other. It's an indoor outdoor pool that has a partition. You can easily get to the other side by swimming under the partition, and the water gets deeper where it's separated. One of the children looked as if he was 6 years old, was scared to swim to the other side without goggles, so he actually asked to borrow a pair that Marvin, Carmelo's cousin, was using. So they went back to playing, and moments later, the child's grandmother walks in and starts talking with her daughter, the child's mother. The daughter asked her mom if she knew where the kid was because he wasn't out there with them. So the whole time, Carmelo is listening to their conversation. He said they were saying the kid wasn't in the pool because they thought that he had gotten out and didn't see him in there. So Carmelo took it upon himself to search underwater for the kid. He ended up finding him unresponsive, pulling the goggles from his face and carrying him from the pool. The mother and grandmother noticed them and started to scream. Someone in the dining area heard the noise, ran in, and started chest compressions. On yesterday, we spoke with the grandmother. The little boy is at the OLOL Children's Hospital. He's still on a ventilator. He's starting to breathe on his own a little, but is having lung damage. We ask you to keep the Brown family in your prayers, as well as the other children that were present and had to witness this incident. We also ask you to send Mello a few short words just to let him know what a great job he has done. He was emotional at the time. He said that could have easily been one of his siblings. We really appreciate you. Hashtag our little hero. Like, damn, that's wow. That really speaks to what type of child that he was. You 14 years old and you literally saved a kid's life. I mean, granted, you may not have done the chest compressions, but if it wasn't for you, they wouldn't have been able to pull him out of that water. They wouldn't have seen him. This is what I mean by parents. Please watch your kids because during the summertime, drownings are the worst, especially in the state of Georgia. I can't count how many articles or news stories that I've seen on small kids that have drowned. Please watch your babies. But, according to his family, they knew that Carmelo was gifted early on. He was, that type of child. Not to mention, he was skilled when it came to his athletics, particularly football and track. So, let's talk about his school days and what he was into out there in that Lone Star State. Now, Carmelo was a student over at Centennial High School in Frisco. And listen, he wasn't just one of those kids that just kind of sat in the back of the classroom, trying to blend in with the furniture. He was Mr. Popularity. By all accounts, in the court records and, according to his teachers and his peers, baby, when I say this little boy was heavy involved in stuff, thriving and just out there making moves. And when you look at his activities, Carmelo was a straight up student athlete. He was a major factor on the varsity football team, and he didn't just play either. He was the team captain. And y'all know they don't just get that captain's badge for just showing up, okay? That takes some respect from the squad and the coaches, all of that. Like you got to put in work to get captain's title. Like I remember what it was like in high school and college and watching how much they had to deal with and then do it. I ain't got the patience. I'll sit on the sideline and watch the games in a minute, but more power to the captains. Plus, the captains, they got all the chicks, okay? Like, do you know how good you felt to just be like, oh, I'm dating the captain of the football team, or oh, I'm dating the captain of the basketball team? Like, I've been there. I dated the captain of the football team in college, and baby, oh, the status that came with it, but it also came with a bunch of birds. But I digress. Luckily, Carmelo had him a little girlfriend. But yeah, like I said, you gotta earn that. And on top of him holding it down on the gridiron, he was also a key runner for the track and field team too. Like homie was running sprints. He represented his school and pushing them limits, okay? Like multi-talented. That's what I love. And on top of that, Carmelo had a totally clean record. No priors, no run ins with the law. He was just that, typical 17. I can't even say typical, honestly, but he was just a 17-year-old kid that, locked into his books and, captioning or captaining his, if captaining is a word, captaining his football team and running track and trying to secure a future for himself and his family. Like, it's wild when you look at it, right? Like, this is a young man with his whole life ahead of him. Born in Louisiana, holding it down as the oldest sibling, maintaining like this just immaculate record and then leading his peers on the field at Centennial High. Like it just goes to show how fast a trajectory can change in a split second. And that split second happened when he came across Austin Metcalf. Austin Matthew Metcalf was born July 31st, 2007, in Frisco, Texas, to Jeff and Megan Metcalf. And from day one, he wasn't coming in alone. He was born a twin, coming into life side by side with his brother, twin brother to be exact, Hunter Metcalf. And growing up, Austin was raised in a very tight knit household by his parents. His mom talked about how he was a total morning kid and a natural born hugger, and, the kind of person who acted like a peacemaker wherever he went. Okay, we're going to get into that later. His dad talked about watching him grow up way too fast and remembering the early days of teaching him how to catch his very first fish and taking him out for his first hunt. I'm wondering what they were hunting. I had a joke, but I'm gonna leave that alone. Oof. Jesus is working on me. I'm trying, y'all, because I really wanted to say something. All right, I gotta be better. Okay, I'm sorry. So for Austin, the place where he laid his roots and built his friendships and spent his defining years growing up was right in the heart of Frisco, Texas. And like I said, Frisco is one of those fast moving, heavy suburban spots outside of Dallas. And it's also a place that's known for the big sports culture and, heavy competition and deep community ties. Hell, honestly, that's any part of Texas, really. Football, religion, and community. Like, trust me, I know. Y'all know I'm from Texas. That's where I grew up. That's the environment as in its totality. Like, if you don't like football, if you don't like red meat, baby, you getting kicked clean up out the state. Okay, I can't count how many. Oh, and pickup trucks, because Lord knows Texas is full of them, baby. You got to have a pickup truck with a beer in the cup holder. Friday night lights headed to the football game, and damned if it ain't some red meat on the grill. Okay, or is it just me? No? Okay. I didn't think so. But, like I said, that's the environment that shaped him into the young man that he became. Austin was a junior over at Memorial High School in Frisco, and he was pretty smart. Like, let me tell you, when you look at the academic and school records, Austin wasn't just getting by. He, much like Carmelo, he was absolutely handling his business in the classroom. Like, this kid was pulling down a heavy 3.97 GPA. So basically a 4.0, and you don't get numbers like that by accident. Like that takes real discipline. It takes late nights. It takes focus. Like, I got a kid that has freaking panic attacks if he gets a B. He gets mad at himself and puts himself on punishment. I ain't never seen no shit like that before in my life. But, that's dedication. Like, you are that focused on making sure that you maintain a high GPA. But at the same time, he wasn't just locked into the textbooks either. Like I said, much like Carmelo, Austin was a major standout force when it came to his school activities. He was a premier student athlete, holding down heavy on the varsity football team as the MVP linebacker. And if you don't know anything about football, especially Texas football, them Friday night lights, being the MVP linebacker is, like, a really big deal. Like, it's like they consider that, like, okay, hey, you're the heart and the soul and the enforcer of, that entire defense. And it had me thinking about, Michael Orr, what was that movie, The Blind Side? Was he the linebacker? Like, I feel like he was linebacker or wide receiver, I don't know. But, I remembered them saying that he was, like, the heart of the team, the enforcer of the team and all of that. But that's what Austin was. And it's weird because there were so many comparisons between him and Carmelo, like, it was scary, because on top of football, he didn't stop on the gridiron either. Austin was also heavily involved in track and field out there competing for Memorial High. He's pushing his athletic limits alongside his peers. In fact, he and his twin brother Hunter did pretty much everything together. Like, they shared the field together, the locker room, that deep competitive drive. And according to his coaches and his teammates and his family, Austin was looked at like a true warrior and a leader and a friend who had a natural way of bringing people together on and off the field. So again, much like Carmelo, he's a 18 or excuse me, 17-year-old junior with a brilliant future ahead of him. And, he's got these deep family ties. He's got the grades. He's got the, college dreams, all of that, just like Carmelo. And so that's why I said the similarities between the two are uncanny. Like, they're damn near basically the same person. Well, on paper at least, just, different ethnicities. And it's it's incredibly heavy when you lay it all like that, when you lay it out there like that. Like, you got this young man with the world at his feet. He's born and raised right there in Texas. He got a twin brother. He's a brilliant student with a 3.97 GPA, dominating the football field as the MVP linebacker. And then you got Carmelo, who's also a young man with the world at his feet, a brilliant student. I think his GPA was 3.7, and he's the captain of his football team. Like, it really shows you how a single moment can completely just shatter a family's reality and leave a house completely quiet. And and I think that's exactly what happened on April 2nd, 2025. Now, this day is a rainy, gloomy spring Wednesday out in Frisco, Texas. Like everybody is out at the David Kendall Stadium. The Kai Kendall Stadium is like one of those bigger stadiums. It's like where they have the massive track meets, like the nationals and all of that. So multiple schools in the district are pulling up. Like it's hundreds of kids everywhere. Energy's high. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with how track meets go, but baby, if you got a kid that runs track, you better have an umbrella, several bottles of frozen water that's going to end up melting. You better have some comfortable seats, all of that, because you're going to be out there all damn day, rain or shine. Well, unless it's lightning, but you out there. And that was the case here. And because of the fact that it was raining, the teams were setting up those large, like, pop-up tents all over the stadium bleachers just so that, they could keep dry between their events. Now remember, Carmelo and Austin didn't know each other. They went to different high schools. Carmelo was repping Centennial High School and Austin was repping Memorial High School. So, they had zero beef with each other before this day. Like no history, no prior words, no nothing. It just turned into one of those wrong place, wrong time situations that escalated past the point of no return. So at some point during the meet, Carmelo sees his boy Eddie Para under the tent. And Eddie sees him and he was like, "Hey, bro, what's good? What's going on, man? What you doing up here? Come hang out over here." Now, it seems innocent, right? Right. So he walks under the bleachers and, they dapping it up, they chopping it up, they talking, and he's taking shelter under the team tent, that belongs to Memorial High School, even though he goes to Centennial. Okay, so there's been rumors. This is what I wanted to clarify on because I had to correct this part. There were some rumors floating around that Carmelo was suspended prior to this day. And this is why I don't rely on blog sites or anything like that. Like I rely on court documents and solidified reliable sources that can be verified. So it just so happens that there was a direct interview from his father, Andrew, that just got released. And he clarified, he said he was never in trouble. And no, he was never suspended for no knife. Actually, what I learned is that they had a smear campaign that they did. So basically, he's saying, like, no, my son was never suspended. Y'all can get that shit out your heads, okay? Because there were some erroneous reports that Carmelo had gotten suspended from Centennial High School prior to the incident. So he wasn't supposed to be out there and all of that. That is incorrect. Okay. That's a part of what needed to be corrected in tonight's episode. The day of the incident, Carmelo had every right to be at that event. Now, also, according to coaches in track culture, because I've seen it firsthand, kids swap tents and socialize all the time under each other's tents. Like I've seen it because again, I got a student athlete and track is one of his sports. He goes and kicks it with people from different schools that he knows all the time. I ain't never heard them say not once, hey, get up out my tent. Like, cause it's not your shit. But y'all get where I'm going with it. But on this specific rainy day, under this specific tent, the vibe kind of shifted a little bit. So Austin and a few of his, Memorial teammates, they pull up to the tent, they walk up to the tent, and they see Carmelo sitting there. And for whatever reason, Austin was like, "Hey, who the hell is this?" Mind you, Eddie, Carmelo's boy, had invited him under there. But Austin, he's not feeling it. So he's telling him, "Yo, you need to get the hell up out of here. This ain't your tent. Get out." Yeah, this has me questioning that whole statement that was made at the beginning about him being on some kumbaya type shit and how, he was the peacemaker. This don't sound very peacemaker-ish, but again, we're gonna get into that later. So, he's telling him like, "Yo, you need to get the hell up out of here." And at first, Carmelo is chill. Like he was like, "Bro, it ain't that deep. Like, I ain't bothering nobody. Like, I'm over here with my homeboy," referring to Eddie. Now, okay, with Eddie, this I know it's early on, but this is where I'm starting to think.
You done fucked up, right? No, 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 no. You know you done fucked up, right?
Because, like, why in the hell didn't you speak up and just be like, "Hey, Austin is cool. I invited Carmelo over here," or something. Not just sitting there and saying nothing. This supposed to be your homie. This supposed to be your friend. You saw your boy getting into a verbal altercation with him. You saw Austin approach him. So it's not like y'all didn't see this. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all it took was to say, "Hey, I told him it was cool for him to come up under here." Or, "Hey, fam, you tripping. You don't own this tent." Like, both of them were track runners. Both of them were track stars. So at the end of the day, hey, chill the hell out. I mean, like, come on. It's raining. Kids are getting wet. But, Eddie just sits there and says nothing. And that really irritates me. It pisses me off. And I'm just like, okay, like, I got to remember that he a kid. So obviously, it didn't go down that way. So Austin is telling Carmelo, you need to get the hell out from under this tent. You need to leave, all of that. And Carmelo doesn't just, pack up and walk away. Like, he's refusing. He's sitting there. And he was like, "I'm not moving." And right there, in the middle of a crowded stadium, the tension starts to just cook. Like, according to the witnesses that were in the tent, and of course they later took the stand, and according to some of the official police reports, the words that started flying out back and forth, woo-hoo, it went from a basic, "Get out of our tent," to this heated, high stakes confrontation. Some of the key witnesses, keyword some of them were saying that Carmelo started the fight and that he was, going at Austin, and, Austin wasn't trying to have a brawl at the school event, and how Austin, straight up told Carmelo like he wasn't about to fight him at a track meet. But then there were some witnesses that was like, no, Austin was very much the aggressor. He was being extremely aggressive with Carmelo. And, there were accusations and threats that apparently came from both sides. But, I'm just looking at it like either way, the situation didn't de escalate, it gets more intense. Now, according to the paperwork, Carmelo then reaches down into his backpack after, Austin is charging him up so much. And as he's reaching inside of his backpack, he looks at Austin and he tells him, "Touch me and see what happened." Now, okay, now, you can't say stuff like that. Like, y'all know that's like instigating. That's like, you know, challenging you one on one. You know what I'm saying? So the court documents and the witness testimonies, they show that, inside of that bag, Carmelo was already gripping a black knife. Okay. And this is another area where there are too many rumors. Now, the biggest rumor is that Carmelo had a tool that was used for track spikes, which was something that, a lot of his teammates had. That's false. Okay, people? In all actuality, it was a knife per the court documents. Now, it may have been used to clean the spikes, but this was very much a knife that he had. Definitely. Now, of course, I'm not making excuses for Austin or Carmelo, but that's what it was. So, Austin's teammates testified that they could see Carmelo's hand inside of his bag holding on to something before, any physical contact was ever made, which was the knife. So Austin, whether it was him, being threatened or just trying to get this dude away from his space, he reacts. And so Austin steps up and he's like, "I told you, get up out of here," and shoves Carmelo. And the minute that he got physical and that physical contact happens, everything goes into absolute chaos. So, like, in a split second, Carmelo pulls his hand out of that bag. Like, he isn't trying to throw a punch, though. He flashes a black knife and drives it straight into Austin's chest. Like, one single deep plunge. And just like that, the track meet stops. The blade went straight through Austin's heart. Like, it was a massive fatal wound. And, immediately after the blade connects, Austin, like, steps back. And, there's all these kids that are standing close by and they see this. And you just hear Austin whisper, "He fucking stabbed me." And then you hear, "Oh my God," right before his knees buckle. And so Austin collapses right there in the stadium bleachers. And this part, I ain't gonna front, it got me a little, but the most heartbreaking part of this entire day, he drops right into the arms of his twin brother, Hunter. Like, Hunter is holding his twin brother. Blood is everywhere. Students are screaming. Coaches are running up. And the entire stadium just goes into absolute pandemonium. Now, while the crowd is trying to save Austin's life, Carmelo, he's gone. He dips. But he can't really get too far because like there's police and security everywhere. And so they're heavy at the stadium for the event. So they lock the scene down like immediately. And they find Carmelo shortly after the fight and they find the weapon and they put him into custody. Now, again, I'm a little confused because in some of the articles that I read, it said that Carmelo didn't try to run and that he went for help. But whichever one it was, at any rate, they got him into custody. And so, meanwhile, Austin is being rushed to a nearby hospital, but the damage was already done. He's pronounced dead from that single stab wound to the chest. Damn, one rainy Wednesday afternoon. It just sounds crazy because it's like a dispute over a dry spot under a plastic sports tent. Like a verbal argument that escalated in seconds, a warning, a push, and a fatal blade. Like, that's exactly what went down on April 2nd, 2025, the day that this high school track meet turned into a permanent tragedy for 2 families. The Experience the Exhale 2.0 Summit is coming fall 2026. Experience the Exhale is a faith rooted wellness community for women that are navigating life, love, and identity. If you're in a season of transition, married, separated, divorced, or simply rediscovering yourself as a single woman, this is your safe space to breathe, heal, and gain clarity. Through guided support and a powerful sisterhood, Experience the Exhale helps you release what no longer serves you and step into your next chapter with peace and purpose. Connect with us and locate your rainbow. Sis, it's time to exhale. Follow Experience the Exhale on all social media handles, Instagram and Facebook at Experience the Exhale. You can also check out their website to take the clarity quiz on www.experiencetheexhale.com. So, like I said, the second that the knife connected to Austin's chest, oh, it was hot up in there. And like I said, the police and school resource officers, they locked the stadium down. They got Carmelo, they detained him. I think he was like at the north end of the track. And so they're telling him, they're like, oh, put your hands up, put your hands in the air. And Carmelo didn't deny anything. He was vocal. Like, he looked at the officers and he was like, I was protecting myself. He put his hands on me. So the officer radios in that they had the alleged suspect in custody. And Carmelo cut him off and he straight up told him, I'm not alleged. I did it. He put his hands on me. I told him not to. And so they're walking him out in handcuffs. And this is where I think a lot of people don't realize what happened is like, even though he said that, he's just like, hey, is Austin going to be okay? You know, is this self-defense? Like, I really feel like he thinks that it was self-defense because he's like, "Hey, you know, is he okay? This was self-defense, right?" So Carmelo gets booked into the Collin County Jail on a heavy, and I do mean heavy, $1 million bond. But just 12 days later, because he had a completely clean record with no priors, a judge knocked that thing on down to $250,000. And 3 days after that, Carmelo posted bail and walked out of jail. But y'all know walking out don't mean that you free. So Carmelo gets placed under strict house arrest and he had to rock an ankle monitor. He got hit with severe restrictions on his social media usage. And because the internet went completely feral over this case, you've got massive racial tension, doxing, death threats flying back and forth. So Carmelo and his family had to completely pack up and relocate to an undisclosed location just to stay safe. Like, his siblings, his brothers and sisters had to be pulled from school. His daddy was working, but he was working out of town because there was nowhere local he could work without being recognized. Austin's funeral was held Saturday, April 12th, 2025, at his home church, Hope Fellowship, Frisco East. And by 10 a.m., the church was completely packed out. There were hundreds of people pulling up, family members, close neighbors, teachers, and a massive sea of high school students. Like, you had teenagers from the Memorial High School and rival schools, across the district. They were setting aside their little sports beefs, all coming together, wearing their team jerseys and their school colors to, show solidarity for the Metcalf family. And the church was decorated with massive floral arrangements, and they had his varsity football helmet sitting out, and his Memorial High sports gear displayed, and of course, photos that showed the last 17 years of his life. And he was smiling with his friends in the pictures, holding up fish that he had caught with his dad, and just being the vibrant kid that everybody knew him as. So who the hell was that kid that was under that tent? But anyway, so Austin's parents and his friends and his coaches, they all took turns stepping up to the microphone on the day of the funeral, and they talked about how Austin was a natural born peacemaker, a 4.0 student who always helped his peers, and a fierce warrior minded MVP linebacker who left everything on the field. And so the Metcalf family, they escorted Austin to a private burial service. Like, they didn't want, a bunch of eyes. Like, it was away from the news cameras and the public eye. And they finally laid their boy to rest in that Texas ground. Now, while Carmelo was sitting under house arrest waiting on his day in court, his family and his advocates, oh, they were making major moves behind the scenes. So they launched a massive online crowdfunding campaign on GiveSendGo. Now, they did have a GoFundMe, but it was shut down because of his legal status. And so they had that alternative, GiveSendGo. Now, the funds from the GoFundMe, the Anthonys received none of that money. And when it came to GiveSendGo, the fund completely blew up, pulling in over $600,000. Sadly, a lot of people on the timeline that I was looking at were heavily criticizing how that money was being handled, but the fund organizers and the platform's co-founder cleared that up real quick, okay? And we're going to get into that later. But, they stated that the $500,000 was strictly earmarked to secure Carmelo's high-powered legal defense team, to handle their emergency relocation, to cover basic living costs while they were hiding out, and to pay for security and counseling. And the bad part is people are still talking and gossiping about how the money is being spent, which, like I said, we're going to get into a little bit later. But that wasn't the only move being made. Now, remember, this happened in what? April of 2025. So it was right at the end of senior year. Now, Carmelo was supposed to graduate from Centennial High School. Even though he was sitting at home on an ankle monitor facing a first-degree murder charge, a Dallas-based advocacy group called the Next Generation Action Network, they stepped in because there were people that felt like, he shouldn't graduate even though he did the work. So the group stepped in and they pointed out that Carmelo had a 3.7 GPA and had already completed all of his academic requirements before the stabbing happened. So the advocacy group, they pushed heavy and they ended up getting a good resolution. Carmelo was officially granted his high school diploma. Now, the Frisco ISD superintendent made it very clear, homie would not be allowed to walk across this stage because he's facing severe, felony charges right now. Like, no student facing a major Title 5 felony was allowed to walk across that stage or step foot at the official ceremony, which, I mean, as much as we dislike it, it makes sense. But Carmelo, he still got his paper from home, so that was what mattered to him. And baby, when Austin Metcalf's father found out through social media that his son's killer was still getting a high school diploma, he was heated. The shit hit the fan. He went straight to the Frisco ISD administration and demanding answers from the superintendent feeling completely stonewalled by the system while he was grieving his son. Because while Carmelo's family was raising a $500,000 and securing diplomas and everything, Austin's parents, Jeff and Megan, they're trapped in this living nightmare. Like, like the Anthonys, they're dealing with pure unadulterated grief. They're dealing with public scrutiny. And according to his dad, they were even targeted by internet trolls and got swatted like 6 different times at their house. But instead of, being defeated, Austin's family, they poured all of their energy into keeping their son's legacy alive. So they launched their own GoFundMe campaign titled Honoring Austin Metcalf, Help His Family Heal. And the community pulled up heavy for them too, the same way it had done Carmelo. The fund raised over $588,000 with massive top donations coming in from major internet figures like the streamer Aiden Ross. He dropped 10,000 to help the family out. And when May of 2025 rolled around, the moment that, Austin was supposed to be celebrating his own school achievements, his family found the ultimate way to honor him. So at the Frisco ISD graduation ceremony, Austin's twin brother Hunter, he walked up on that stage with the entire stadium on their feet. Hunter accepted a posthumous diploma on behalf of his twin brother. And they celebrated Austin, not as a victim, but as the MVP linebacker, the 4.0 student, and, the leader that they believed him to be. But there was still just so much sadness. Like for the rest of the year leading up to the June 2026 trial, Austin's mom said her reality became completely silent. She spent her days visiting a grave that, and having conversations with a headstone while the legal, clock kept ticking down. I mean, look at it. Two families, two completely different paths of waiting. One side is waiting for legal survival, collecting over $500,000 in defense funds and securing a diploma under house arrest, which is an accomplishment. And the other side is navigating pure rage and sadness, raising over $500,000 as well to heal and to watch a twin brother walk across a graduation stage alone. Like, that is the wild, intense timeline of what happened between the arrest and the moment that they finally stepped inside that Collin County courtroom. So, after over a year, it's time for Carmelo to go to trial. And because of the popularity of the case, the trial was not in Frisco, Texas, but rather in McKinney, Texas. Now, it's not much of a difference, honestly, but this highly anticipated trial officially kicked off with jury selection and opening statements at the beginning of June 2026. And for nearly 2 weeks, the entire nation was locked into the Collin County Courthouse, watching two legal teams go to absolute war with each other. So you've got Judge John Roach Jr. presiding over the trial, and he made it clear from jump that he wasn't about no bullshit and he wasn't going to turn his courtroom into a circus. Then you got to look at the legal teams. So, both sides brought out heavy hitters. For the state of Texas, the prosecution was led by none other than Collin County District Attorney Bill Risky, alongside prosecutor Dewey Mitchell. Now, these guys came in with a clear, aggressive game plan. And then on the other side of the aisle, holding it down for the defense, was high profile attorney Mike Howard. Now, can I clarify on something? Y'all was swearing up and down that he had a public defender. Mike Howard used to be a public defender. Mike Howard typically can decide when he wants to, take on a high profile case such as this one. I mean, who wouldn't, because it's beneficial for your career. But he had quite a uphill battle. You gotta try to convince a 12-person jury that a fatal stabbing at a high school sports event was a justified act of self-defense. And this was gonna be extra hard because this was an all-white jury. An all-white jury in the state of Texas? Oof, Jesus, Devontae Christ. Y'all already know how this about to go. I'm still trying to figure out that, like, I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. But, I'm just like, okay, I I got my own little theories on that. But I'm gonna get into that more during fair or foul. Y'all already know how I'm coming on that. Okay. So the trial is underway, and it's just like this bad feeling in the pit of everyone's stomachs. Like when the state kicked off its case, prosecutors Bill Sky and Dewey Mitchell, they didn't hold anything back. They called dozens of witnesses to the stand, 21 key witnesses during the guilt phase alone to completely pick apart Carmelo's defense, self defense claim. The prosecution's witness list was kind of I guess you could say, a heavy mix of students and track coaches, responding officers, and forensic experts. And they put student eyewitnesses on the stand who were standing right there under that Memorial High School tent when the argument popped off in the first place. Now, y'all, some of these witness testimonies were a little flawed. Like they said that clearly Austin was the aggressor, but that Carmelo was wrong in defending himself. Or they would say, well, yeah, Austin was the one that started it, but Carmelo was instigating him. Yeah, Austin shoved him first, but Carmelo said something to him. Like, what kind of shit? But they're testifying clearly that Austin Metcalf didn't have a weapon and that Austin's final words after the sudden altercation were the breathless, he fucking stabbed me. Like everybody agreed on that he said he fucking stabbed me. So the state also calls the Centennial High School track and football coach Adam Linwood, who testified about how, students from all different teams mingle and they hang out during the meets, which I mean, it makes sense because they're there all day. They know each other. Just because they're competing against each other don't mean they ain't cool with each other. Like, damn. And so the prosecution, they called several high school students and track athletes who were under or near the Memorial High School tent. And they testified about the moments leading up to the stabbing and, who all identified Carmelo as the aggressor. See, that's what I said by conflicting, statements. But one of those that testified was Eddie Parra, who admitted that he invited Carmelo into the tent in the first place. And so when the defense asked why he didn't speak up when Austin kept asking Carmelo to leave, Eddie says, I ain't feel the need to. Y'all know I got something to say about that, right? So the Frisco police officers, they're called to the stand to, detail the chaos of what happened at the stadium that day and showing how fast the scene, turned into a nightmare. But the most devastating testimony came when the Collin County Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Elizabeth Ventura, took the stand. She walked the jury through the autopsy, testifying with absolute scientific precision that the knife went straight through Austin's heart, 2.5 to 3 inches deep. Austin's family had to like sit there right there in the gallery. They boohooing, they weeping, and they're watching the clinical breakdown of how their boy's life was taken, basically. So the prosecution's entire argument was simple, but effective. DA Bill Sky looked straight at the jury during closing arguments and dropped a line that echoed through the whole courthouse. He said, "You don't get to meet a shove with a stab, especially if you provoke the shove." And they argued that Carmelo brought a hidden 5-inch blade to a track meet, provoked a fight, and then launched an unjustified sneak attack on an unarmed kid. Now, when it was time for the defense attorney, Mike Howard, he spent his days fighting tooth and nail, baby. He called character witnesses and teachers to show, who Carmelo was before that day, because y'all know they're going to characterize him as a monster. He wanted the image of Carmelo to be who he was, a good kid. And so Mike argued that Carmelo, who was 17 at the time, acted out of like a split second of fear and chaos after being confronted and shoved by Austin, who was a much larger varsity linebacker. And the defense maintained that it was pure survival instinct, nothing but, a standard self defense claim. Now, Carmelo, he exercised his Fifth Amendment right and never took the stand. He stayed completely silent, leaving his fate entirely in Mike Howard's hands. Like, I really wish that he had said something. Like, you could see how torn he was, and defeat was just like all over his face. And on Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, after days of exhausting testimony, the trial officially hit its climax. Judge John Roach Jr. delivered the final instructions to the jury. And in a major legal twist, the judge did give some grace, which was shocking. He allowed the jury to consider a lesser charge of manslaughter because at first he was like against it. He was like, "No, nah, we're not doing that." But towards the end, he said, "You know what? I'll go ahead and let them consider manslaughter." And manslaughter carried a far lighter sentence of 2 to 20 years alongside that first degree murder charge. So the 12-person jury, they pack up their notes and they walk back into the deliberation room. And the entire country is holding its breath. Like all up and down my timeline were people talking about the outcome. People were posting convictions before any official word had been given. Like I was sitting there like, yo, are y'all crazy? Like, is you cool? The timeline was flooded, y'all. People were guessing that the deliberation would take days. They were talking about, oh, we're gonna be out here forever. Nah, the jury has seen enough, baby. Them shits went back there and had some coffee, talked shit, and deliberated for approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes. Y'all heard me. Under 3 hours. They knew what they wanted. And at 2:05 p.m. Central Time, that knock came on the door. Jury walked back into the crowded, dead silent courtroom, and Judge Roach called for the verdict. So the jury completely rejected the self defense argument. They rejected the manslaughter option, and they said, we, the jury, find Karmelo Anthony guilty of first degree murder. We, the jury, find Karmelo Sincere Anthony guilty. Now, Carmelo's now 19 years old, so he's officially a convicted murderer at this point. Now, there were some reports from inside the courtroom that said that, Carmelo was just sitting at the defense table with his head down and, he's showing almost zero visible emotion, because it's devastating. And, he's literally being cuffed and escorted out. But the trial isn't over though, because in Texas, it's a little different. See, you go straight from the verdict into the punishment phase. And the exact same jury has to decide how many years you're going to get. So, Austin's twin brother, Hunter, he spoke at the part where they get to let you do the victim impact. And he said, you took a son, a brother, a friend, and my best friend from this world. You took someone from me who was supposed to be an uncle, a godfather to my kids. Now I want everything taken from you. Eventually, your name will be forgotten, but my brother's memory will live on. And then Austin's father, Jeff, he spoke saying, we were robbed. Don't you look down. You failed your parents, you failed yourself, and you failed society. You don't belong in this community. You're going to prison. I forgave you the day it happened. I don't forgive what you did. You can't look me in the eyes, but you can stab my fucking son. Uh, Never mind. Nope. So the defense tried one final legal maneuver. They asked the jury to find that Carmelo acted under sudden passion. Now, if they could convince the jury that the stabbing was an immediate, uncontrollable emotional reaction to being pushed, his, maximum potential sentence would drop from life down to just 20 years. So to make their point, Mike Howard called only one witness for the punishment phase, Carmelo's mother, Kayla. Like it was easily the most emotional moment of the entire 2 weeks. She took that stand and broke down into heavy tears as, Howard's handing her tissues and water. And she just looked at them 12 jurors and she literally begged for mercy for her firstborn child. She's telling them he'll always be my baby. I love him very much. And, seeing his mother break down on the stand, it just completely broke Carmelo's composure. He started bawling, y'all, right at the defense table, buried his face in his hands, and he just cried right there with her. But messed up part, prosecutor Dewey Mitchell, he wasn't letting up. He cross-examined Kayla, pointing out that no matter what the jury decided, she still gets to visit, gets to talk to, and have her son as part of her life, a luxury that Austin Metcalf's parents would never have. And so the prosecution closed out by telling the jurors mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. They demanded a heavy sentence to match the permanent loss of life. And so the jury went back to discuss the punishment. They're sitting there like, okay, what are we gonna give this man? It's a lot of stuff going on. What do we do? Now they rejected the sudden passion argument completely. They had already done that before they left the courtroom. And on the evening of Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, the final sentence was officially handed down by Judge John Roach Jr. Karmelo Sincere Anthony was sentenced to 35 years in state prison. Now, the downside is that in the state of Texas, under Texas law, because it's a first-degree violent felony, Carmelo has to serve a mandatory flat time of at least half that sentence. So that's 17 and a half years before he's even eligible to look at a parole board. And so when he learns his fate, the life literally left from Carmelo's eyes. And immediately he's remanded into custody of the Collin County Sheriff, and he's waiting for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice to assign him to a permanent prison unit. And at that point, social media went crazy when his conviction was learned. Celebrities like rapper Cardi B, she weighed in and she suggested that there was racial bias that played a role in Carmelo Anthony's murder conviction. And she criticized the 35-year sentence. Like her comments, oh baby, it reignited some national discussions on race and justice and youth conflict. And it drew a lot of support and criticism. And y'all know Cardi don't give a fuck, okay? She was like, listen, I'ma rally and do what I can to support legal resources for his appeal. She got sons, so of course she's thinking that. Then Representative Jasmine Crockett, she publicly criticized the 35-year sentence as over prosecution, arguing it on YouTube that, race played a role in the trial's outcome. Now, this next person, Charleston White, originally he was offering financial assistance for Carmelo's appeal. And we're gonna get into him a little bit later, but Young Miami, she posted, "At some point, we have to stand for something. This is truly heartbreaking to see as a Black mother raising a Black son. I cannot get this case out of my head. Currently using all my resources to get eyes on this. I'm challenging everyone with a voice to speak up and let's stand together. Enough is enough. If they not killing us, they throwing us in jail." I only talk like that because after I saw her in BMF when she was like, "Meech, Meech, wear his chain, Meech." That killed it. Y'all know I gotta try to find humor in some of these cases, man, like, cause this one is dark, so I gotta try to find some humor in it. My bad. Oh, but then you got individuals like Azalea Banks with her controversial ass, crunchy ass bitch, who's saying that he deserved the sentence that he got. And, clearly somebody just asked her because they knew her goofy ass was gonna say something stupid. But what really gets me is that after the trial and sentencing, the twins' father, Jeff, appeared on a podcast where he referred to Anthony as a watermelon felon. And when I say Anthony, I mean Carmelo. When he referred to Carmelo as a watermelon felon and was talking cold cash shit about Carmelo's parents, calling his father Andrew a pussy and his mother a drunk bitch. Then he says, "You're grifters. You should be ashamed of yourselves." Claiming that, the pair didn't attend their son's sentencing and suggesting that Child Protective Services should check on their other children. Like, wow, dude is really on one. Like, you are really something else. Like, can we say like father, like son at this point? How about at the end of the day, Kayla was the only one called to speak during his sentencing. So what you mean they weren't there? She spoke. The fuck? But the Mr. Father of the Year says that poor boy is fixing to experience a life that I would not wish upon anyone, but he deserves what he gets because we're all responsible for our actions. What it boils down to for me is this: Austin will never walk through that door again and never give me a hug. Now I get, okay, let me be clear, okay? I am never going to take away from a parent grieving from losing their child, especially to, violence or especially to something like this. I would never do that. But at the end of the day, your son attacked him first, okay? I know I'm kinda skipping ahead a little bit early, but your son came after him first. Everybody's saying he was this peacemaker. How could he be a peacemaker when he literally approached him and was like, "What are you doing here? Get the hell out of our tent." And to the point that he shoved him. So, of course, Carmelo's lawyers, they filed a notice of appeal on his behalf, questioning, whether the case was properly handled at trial, including issues related to jury selection. Like no black men or women were selected for the jury at all. Not just that, but the witnesses lied on the stand and gave inconsistent statements during the trial. Carmelo's mom said everyone lied on the stand. All of the witnesses' statements were inconsistent. All of them. Now, the bad part is there's so many different allegations going on after the trial that Carmelo's family are still having to deal with right now. Okay, so for one, the money that was raised for Carmelo's family, there's a lot of discussions right now about how Carmelo filed indigenous when he filed his appeal. In the appeal, there was a portion where Carmelo said that he was penniless, destitute, and indigent. And there's a whole public outcry of individuals that feel like his parents spent the money on personal things. Charleston White, who at first was all gung ho about helping the Anthony family, has now sided with Austin's father, calling Carmelo the whole watermelon felon thing. Like he didn't outright say it, but he's going as far as creating t shirts that he said he's going to sell with Carmelo's face inside of watermelon water. According to Charleston, he recently had a conversation with Carmelo's father, Andrew, and said that Andrew, was like, oh, he would much rather have the money turned over to him versus getting an attorney. And of course, people are running with things that they see on social media, talking about how Carmelo had a public defender, which he did not. The attorney that was defending him, Mike Howard, used to be a public defender. The attorney that he did represent certain cases to where the client is financially strapped. But in this particular situation, Mike Howard was paid close to $400,000 to represent Carmelo Anthony. Now, because of all of the back and forth about where the money was, raised, Give Send Go actually released a statement on June 9th, 2026, the same day that Carmelo was convicted and sentenced. Give Send Go said, a jury has found Carmelo Anthony guilty in the death of Austin Metcalf. Our hearts are with Austin's family, his twin brother, and everyone grieving a loss that no verdict can undo. Give Send Go hosted a fundraiser connected to this case. Hosting a fundraiser has never been an endorsement of a person, their actions, their legal arguments, or their public statements. It is not a declaration of innocence and it is not a political statement. Give Send Go provides access to lawful fundraising, which we extend across the full spectrum of cases. This fundraiser was created to support pretrial needs, and those funds were dispersed over the past year for lawful purposes, including legal defense and family relocation. With that stated purpose now complete, the fundraiser has been closed and the funds will be paid out. Our policy is that a fundraiser's stated purpose stays accurate so givers always know what they are supporting. Our prayer is for Austin Metcalf's family, for all those affected, and for justice, mercy, and peace in our community. He who has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Give, Send, Go is the world's #1 generosity platform, providing a safe, trusted, and reliable place for people to support the causes that matter most to them. Any questions may be directed to our customer support team, support@givesendgo.com. Okay, so that clears up that little mystery. So, many people are just out here saying that Carmelo's family, they're taking advantage and all of that, when that's definitely not the case. When the trial was over, it's the company's policy to close the fundraiser. In 2025, Give Send Go's co founder confirmed to multiple outlets that the family had not withdrawn any money from the fund at that time. The claim that they, already bought a house and a car with donations was false. The relocation happened because the family was doxxed and receiving death threats. And so, Give Send Go's founder told Fox News in 2025 that funds would go toward a secure location for them to live. This was a safety measure, not a luxury purchase. There was no money used toward Carmelo's bond. Now, it's also been all over social media, mainly Facebook, that since filing for his appeal, Carmelo has received a new attorney. So supposedly his new attorney is Donnie Perellis, and he's a private attorney and a former prosecutor that's based in McKinney, Texas. However, it has not actually been verified by a credible source, so don't take that, don't take that serious because when I googled him, it only showed Facebook as a source, and y'all know I don't roll like that. Also, another accusation that's been thrown out is that Austin's family knew the judge. Now, when I first saw this, I ain't gonna lie, I was heated because my immediate thought was that's a conflict of interest and the judge should have recused himself. So I started, doing a little bit of digging, and they were saying that there was a photo of the judge with Austin's family. And so on June 11th, Judge John Roach, he actually sat down for an interview with ABC affiliate WFAA, and he was asked about his relationship to them. And he answered, I wouldn't know Mr. Metcalf prior to this trial if he had walked up to me and said hello. I don't know the Metcalfs. I sympathize with the Metcalfs and what they've been through and all, but I don't know them personally. Never have. And you know what? There were also some really interesting questions during the interview. Of course, they dug in a little further on the whole picture thing, and the question of AI came up, to which the judge said, that's the problem with social media. One cannot tell what's real and what's not. And he also talked about how he had spent 8 months preparing for the trial and realized that, it was the longest preparation period he had ever undertaken for a case. Like his concern was for the minor witnesses. Many of those witnesses had been doxxed and swatted, and he wanted to, make sure that they didn't change their testimony out of fear. But I mean, them testimonies still seemed a little off. I'm just saying. And so during the conversation, the judge was also asked to share his take on Carmelo Anthony. And, while pointing out that he had spoken to Carmelo several times as, the legal requirement, the judge was like, he seems like a nice young man who committed a crime and he understands today more than any day before today the consequences of committing a crime like he did. As of now, Carmelo is inmate number 026176665 at PAC 1, which is in Navasota, Texas, where he was just transferred to this past Wednesday, like just 2 days after his conviction, I believe. And he'll be eligible for parole November 26th, 2043, and is scheduled for release May 27th, 2061, at which point he will be 54 years old. Once again, people have been spreading rumors that the warden is related to Austin's family. But to be clear, that is not the case at Wallace Pack Unit. That prison is run by Garrett Simmons. Y'all want to know some irony though? The prison that Carmelo is currently at, Wallace Pack, the prison opened in September of 1983. It's named after Wallace Pack, the warden of the Ellis unit, who was drowned in self-defense in 1981. Mm, think about it. But Carmelo's books, they've already been maxed out and his appeal is in motion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Carmelo Anthony. And now it's time for Fair or Foul, where we look at the justice system to determine if the sentencing that was given is indeed fair or if it was just some bullshit that's going to have us sitting back saying, what the fuck? Now, we about to touch on some stuff that everyone is acting like is non-existent. So obviously, there's a lot to unpack here. Carmelo getting 35 years by law and the judicial system for first-degree murder, yes, that sounds about right. But honestly, I'm torn on this one. Now, nobody should ever commit murder. Let me put that out there. Like, honestly, that's just facts, okay? I'm just kind of seeing it as like a lose-lose, like from jump. I don't like the fact that all of the witnesses gave conflicting statements. That boy, Eddie, that got on the stand, he said that he invited Carmelo into the tent. And then when they asked him, why didn't you say something that day when Austin was telling him to leave? His response was, I ain't think it was necessary. Like it was completely necessary. Fuck boy. He's getting confronted by another player who goes to your school, who knows you probably, and you didn't think to say, "Hey, it's all right. It's cool. It's chill." That was your friend, and it pisses me off. Like, a few seconds could have cleared that up. And I do have to remember that these are kids, but at the same time, you were the one that invited him into that tent. You were the reason he was under the tent in the first place. Like, and then all of these witnesses giving, different statements and conflicting statements, and like everybody is saying, "Oh yeah, Austin was the aggressor, but Carmelo did wrong." Like, there's a bunch of miscellaneous and mixed information, and so that's why I'm not gonna harp on that too much, but at the end of the day, he was only under there because you invited him. That's your homie. You literally came and dapped this nigga up and was like, "Yo, what's good? Come chill." That's like inviting somebody to a party. That's like literally saying, "Hey, come to this party, come kick it." And then, when the host comes in and says, "Why are you here?" You stand in the background and you're quiet and you don't say nothing instead of just saying, "Oh, hey, I invited him." And then, as far as telling somebody to get out from under your tent, so what? So what? So what if they was there? He wasn't fucking with you. He wasn't talking to you. He was minding his business, kicking it with his so-called boy. And it's raining. Have a fucking heart. It's fucking raining. Did you buy the tent? Did you put the tent together yourself? Lots of people will get under different tents. Like I said, I got a student athlete that runs track. I can't count how many times I've seen him go into another school's tent because he knows a child from the other school. Never in 1,000 years would I think that somebody would come up to him with a sense of entitlement and say, "Get out of my tent." Like, that is the weirdest territorial shit I've ever seen. If it was that serious, why not just go get an adult? Why not just go and say, "Okay, well, let me go get the coach and tell him he's in our tent?" Because there was no rules saying he couldn't be there. But instead, it turned into a verbal altercation and then into a physical one. And honestly, this may sound wrong to some people, but based off of the way that his father is speaking, and I'm talking about Jeff, I could just imagine how he was. His father got a slick ass mouth, and so does he. Yes, you're grieving because you just lost your child. I'm not going to put that past you, but understand your child ain't perfect. No child is picture perfect. Not Austin, not Carmelo. And parents, if you out here thinking that just because your baby got a 3.7 or a 3.9 or whatever the case may be, and that they do all of these activities, that don't make them perfect, you could literally be feeding the homeless every other day. Your child is not perfect. There's always going to be something that they do or say or act, and you'll be oblivious to it until shit like this happens. Like, I find it odd that the first thing people did was put out images of Carmelo in a negative light. They ain't highlight the fact that he was the captain of the football team, or that he had literally had the same, damn near same GPA as Austin, or that he had so many people that were going to bat for him, or the fact that he fucking saved a life when he was what, 14? No. Instead, they found a picture from years ago and put it up. They did the same thing with Trayvon Martin. When Trayvon Martin was brutally killed, people were posting pictures of him holding the middle finger up. Like, you ain't do the same shit when you were a teenager. You know how many people do that in their adulthood? I know I done posted some pictures that weren't in the best light, back in my day. Now, my adult self probably wouldn't do that, but teenager me and younger adult me, shit, absolutely. But that's life. Lessons are learned. So if you gonna post Carmelo in a negative light, do the same damn thing for Austin, because I know he had some fucked up shit. Hell, they were both practically the same person with their similarities, just different skin colors. Now, with Austin approaching him the way that he did and then putting hands on him, Carmelo, for whatever reason, felt intimidated. You could see the size difference between the two. And he told him, "Put your hands on me and see." Now, okay, there is a part of me that's feeling like when it gets to that point, walk the fuck away from the tent, dude. Just go and kick it with somebody else. Cause clearly your homeboy was up under there and he wasn't gonna stand up and say shit. And he was watching it all go down. I'm sorry, but I'm still mad at that one. Like, that I'd be questioning my friendship with him. Oh, and then the whole thing with the all white jury. This is the state of Texas, so I shouldn't be surprised, but at the same time I am. Because it's like, did y'all really think that this man was gonna get a fair trial? You know what? I can't even say man, but did y'all think that this boy was gonna get a fair trial with an all-white jury? Y'all didn't think that people would have something to say about that? Y'all didn't think that people would look and say, "Yeah, this looks real suspicious," because it does. Like, what was the reason for the all-white juries? I'm curious. What was your reason?
What was the reason?
Like, Texas is a huge state. Like, how many black folks is in Texas? Okay. I really feel like they should have moved the trial to a more, municipal city like Dallas or something like that. But instead, it was close to home. So you mean to tell me y'all couldn't find any reliable black jurors in the city of Frisco, Texas? Like there could have been, or McKinney, there could have been at least one or two black people in that jury. Because I'm just looking at it like you really thought that nobody was gonna pay attention when from jump this has been about racial bias. From jump, it literally was about a young black boy defending himself against a bigger black or bigger white male. Like, you knew people were gonna talk. As an attorney, as a prosecutor, as a judge, you knew that that was gonna happen. And the fact that the jury deliberated for like 2.5 hours, he was screwed before they were even dismissed to deliberate. They had their decision then. Y'all could have given him manslaughter. It wasn't premeditated. It wasn't planned. It was a moment of misjudgment. Period. Point blank. Like, come on. And I think that's the part, that's part of the reason, honestly, why the judge didn't want the media in the courtroom. Of course, he said that judges act different and attorneys act different and all of that. But when the media is there, I feel like they wanted to keep this shit top secret. Like there was a lot of stuff that just didn't seem right and it didn't sit right with me this trial. And I'm glad that Carmelo appealed. I'm hoping that he gets the opportunity for a retrial because it's deserving. And, as for Austin's family, of course, you want to have sympathy because they lost their child. No person deserves to die. Like they said, just because I push you physically does not mean that you should stab me. Now, yes, I get that. Austin was bigger than him, no. But the minute that he pushed him, dude, walk the fuck away, get out that tent and go get somebody and be like, hey, he physically assaulted me. Because then his ass would have been suspended. Call it the coward's way out, whatever you want to call it. But, call it being a punk, whatever. But at the end of the day, you wouldn't be in a courtroom and Austin would be going home to his family. But in the same aspect, in the same breath, I'm also looking at it as if he's a smaller guy, I can see why he chose the option of stabbing him because, Austin is much bigger and he was outnumbered. And I'm wondering, had he been in a situation like that before to, where he had that type of response, because that would explain a lot of things. But then again, that makes me go back to saying, okay, if I'm outnumbered, I'm not going to be in an area where something like this could happen. Like if you coming to me with your people and you trying to jump me, I'm out because clearly my homeboy ain't my homeboy. He watching the shit. And I mean, we never know what we can, really do in that moment and what our capabilities are until we're in that moment. But I will say, parents, teach your kids to keep their fucking hands to themselves because, like, it's insane. I can't count how many videos I see of kids fighting. Like, I literally just saw another video of a woman that was just had a baby and she came home and there was a girl waiting for her at the bottom of her steps. And this woman, when I say just had a baby, like the baby is days old. She's holding her baby in the car seat and she sees the girl waiting on her at the bottom step. She was like, go ahead with that. I got my baby. Let me get my baby upstairs. But the girl didn't even wait. She literally punched this mama in the face, knowing that the girl's hands weren't free, and started hitting her, causing the girl to drop her baby's car seat. And so, while the baby's on the ground screaming and crying, the mom is getting punched. And mama ended up pulling out her gun. And, of course, the girl that had punched her, she had already finished and walked off. But the mom, she's still dealing with all of this. And so she follows her and she shoots her in the leg. And I'm just like, okay, like she followed her, you know, even though I feel like she could have been tending to her baby, she could have chose to shoot her anywhere, but she shot her in the leg, and when you see the shot, it was a smooth shot. But now she's being kicked out of her house. She's facing charges and everything. But my thing was, there were so many people that were out there to witness it. They were all on their phones. Nobody thought to say, "Hey, girl at the bottom of the steps, what you did was wrong. This girl got her baby in her hand." Or, "Hey, let me go help this crying baby who was left laying on the ground because the mom got, drugged." One man had his kid out there, and at one point you could hear in the audio, I guess they thought that she had pepper spray and not a gun, and he was like, "Hey man, just don't spray my kid, man. I got my little one out here." So how about you get your kid and not subject them to this and leave? And while many people are saying that, it's self-defense because she went after her after the girl had walked off, she's facing charges. So that's not going to be self-defense. Well, I'm pretty sure, maybe later they could get into that, but she's facing charges. The self-defense thing is tricky. Now, if it was a situation where Austin and some of his people were jumping on Carmelo, then yeah, him stabbing him, absolute self defense. Because a lot of times they're going to argue that if you can walk away, then you're not able to claim self defense. If you're pursuing the person that did physical harm to you instead of walking away, it's harder to prove self defense. And I really do think that, Carmelo thought that it was really self defense because the first thing that he said to the officer when they detained him was, "He put his hands on me." And he was like, "Hey, is he going to be okay?" He had no clue that he had stabbed him in the heart. And I mean, yeah, he was in the moment, but I'm also like, okay, hey, dude, aim for something else, like his arm or his leg, something like that. So that way you could at least explain yourself. And at most, you would be facing assault charges and not murder. And I'm praying that they protect that baby behind those walls. I am praying that he gets that retrial because I feel like in this instance, this was a situation where things got out of hand very quickly. But what pisses me off the most is the things that I'm seeing on social media. People just running their own stories. I saw the video of the father going off about, Carmelo and the whole watermelon felon thing. And I'm like, and he's saying, oh, his family wasn't there. You can't dictate if another person's family should be in the courtroom when they get to the sentencing. That was hard for their family. His mother was the only one that got to speak when it came time for the sentencing phase. Did it ever dawn on you that maybe it was too hard for them to hear that their son was going to be sentenced to 35 fucking years? How are you going to say that you're the scum of the earth and all of that? They not the ones that killed your son for one. And number two, do you hear how you sound? Because if anybody is scum, I'm going to say it's you. Not once have I heard Carmelo's family speak negative on you or your family. The only thing that they've been doing from day one is fighting for their child. The only thing that they've been doing from day one is saying how the odds are stacked against them. They had an all-white jury. We're not getting a fair trial. Not once have they said anything about you. But then you want to turn around and say that Carmelo is a watermelon felon and you want people to believe that it's not about race, but then you turn around and say the most racial shit that there is. Oh yeah, that tracks. That really makes people feel like, oh, you know what? It's not about race. And then all of these, people attacking Carmelo's family and saying that, they're thinking about themselves and that they spent the money on themselves. That's not the case either. They had to be relocated. Andrew had to get a job out of town. And the way people just jump on the bandwagon with stuff that they see is disgusting. Do your fucking research. Y'all are following all of these blog sites and content creators that don't know the truth. This is why I stick solely to credible sources because if I say something that's incorrect and somebody comes back and tries to sue me, guess what? I could be in a world of trouble. But if I turn around and say, "Oh, I got this from, this affiliate, this source, whatever, whatever," and I can verify it, I'm good. Because if anything, I'm going to go after them too. I'm just saying, like, just do your research, okay? Use credible sources because otherwise you're going to have situations like this where you just out here just talking. And now everybody's talking about this whole give, send, go thing. So the fuck, what if they spent the money? They spent it on their safety. Does that affect your personal life? No. They spent it on their safety to make sure their family was good. That's what it was given for. Like, folks just got to have something to talk about all the time. I swear. That is all for this week's episode of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast. You can follow the show on the various streams on Instagram and TikTok at Infamous One Podcast. That's a number one, by the way, not spelled out. And you can leave a review there. On X, it's Infamous One Pod, where you can also leave a review. On YouTube, you can like, follow, and subscribe. And the link is in the episode description, by the way. On Facebook, you can join the private discussion group, the Infamous Ones discussion group. But please be advised, at this point, y'all already know what I'm about to say. If you don't answer the questions, I'm not going to let you in. But, once you get in there, let's chop it up because we talk about everything. Come on in, have a seat, sit down, tell us what you're sipping on and where you from. The show streams on multiple streaming services like Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and so on. So please leave a review. It only takes a few seconds. Thank you for those that have left, reviews. I guess I should probably read a few of them. The first one comes from Spotify from Tiana on the We'll Always Be Family episode, which was on King Bell killing his whole family. And it says, "Hi, hey Queen. I'm a first time commenter, long time listener as well. I've listened to every single one of your episodes and I really enjoy your podcast. I understand your frustration and I'm sorry. Hey, this way I just wanted you to know that that you do have supporters. I love and appreciate your storytelling. Please keep pushing through." Thank you, Tiana. I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that you've been listening so long. And thank you for, leaving a comment. I'm pushing and trying, I'm trying, y'all. I really am. I promise. Some days are better than others, but, I'm always trying to be as transparent with y'all as possible, and I'm hoping I can get this promotional video that can really help and all of that. So we shall see because right now the streams are down about 25%. And that's really, really bad on average, if streams are down, most people's are down like 4%, but for whatever reason, it's down like 25. The next review comes from Apple Podcasts from It's Des's World, and it's a 5-star caption, "My absolute favorite. I love this podcast so much. Your humor and authenticity while telling stories that are so true and gut-wrenching sometimes is a talent to me. You are truly amazing. What's for you will always be for you, and no one can change that but you. I hope and pray you find the strength and willpower to continue on the road destined for you. Keep pushing. My second favorite would have to be the end when you let loose on the subject. You leave me on the floor every time." Woof. Talk about blushing, because I definitely am. Thank you so much. Listen, y'all know how to pull at a chick's heartstrings, okay? Y'all hyping your girl up and everything like, damn. Okay, thank you. It's Dessa's World. Make sure you follow the Black Box. A new episode is coming soon, and it's a listener recommendation that deals with celebrities that we're going to soon. I think y'all are gonna love it. Saturday, October 10th, 2026. Again, Saturday, October 10th, 2026. There will be a live show celebrating 3 years. Admission is free, but you will need to register on Eventbrite as seating is limited. It's an intimate setting and just something to, vibe out and have a good time. So registration opens July 1st. There will be drinks available, and I'm thinking about getting a food truck possibly, but, just make sure to register. If you want to support the show or if you're feeling the spirit, meaning that liquor that y'all been sipping on, click the link at the bottom of the screen from whatever app you're listening to this episode on and hit listener support to give. You can also donate via the Cash App at $infamous1pod. That's $INFAMOUSONEPOD. And donations go toward court documents, interviews, and all of that. Shout out to those that gave for the promotion. We're almost at our goal. I think we're about halfway there right now. And, this is a way to really save the show. So please consider giving. If you're listening to this episode right now, I want you to go to Cash App and I want you to give $3 or more to $INFAMOUSONEPOD. So, hey, psst, you hear me. If you listening right now, donate $3 or more, okay? But shout out to those that have given. If you have a case that you want to hear more on that you feel has been ignored in the Black community, if you want to inquire about ad space, or if you want to leave a review, send an email to infamousonepod@gmail.com. That's INFAMOUSONEPOD@gmail.com. And once again, people, please share, share, share. This podcast is growing by the day and it means the world. So please keep sharing. Until then, y'all know what it is. I'm your girl Kay. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see y'all next week with a new episode. Stay mobbing, y'all. Peace.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Infamous Ones, a true crime podcast hosted by Kay. Be sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.